Today on the newscast, Israel and Iran both holding major Air Force drills. Plus, a U.S. base in Syria attacked. Get all the breaking details next. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. We told you on yesterday's Watchman live stream that Israel's government reportedly just approved a $1.5 billion budget for an attack on Iran's nuclear program. Now, this does not guarantee that Israel will strike Iran's nuclear facilities, but clearly Israel is preparing for any contingency. And as a matter of fact, today Israel's finance minister Avigdor Lieberman said that a confrontation between Israel and Iran is, quote, only a matter of time and not a lot of time. That's a top Israeli government official, Avigdor Lieberman, today. Now, this follows statements obviously along those lines over the past several months from Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Defense Minister Benny Gantz, the Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff, Aviv Kohavi, and dating back really to the former Prime Minister, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, where Israel has been kind of laying down the gauntlet to Iran and saying, look, if you don't stop with the terror, with the precision-guided missiles, with the expansion of your regime across the region, and of course, with your nuclear program, then we are certainly on a collision course. Unfortunately, Iran has shown no desire to change its ways. It continues its march not only towards the bomb, but across the region, expanding its influence in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and beyond. So we do indeed have this collision course right now. And it's interesting that this week, both Israel and Iran are conducting major Air Force drills. When it comes to Israel, as a matter of fact, this is the largest aerial drill that the state of Israel has ever conducted. It's called Operation Blue Flag 2021. It's a 2-week drill going on right now, taking place in Israel's Negev desert, and it involves 7 nations. In addition to Israel, you have the U.S., India, Greece, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy all taking part in this aerial drill in Israel. So Israel kind of flexing the might of its Air Force along with its allies. A clear message to the Iranian regime. Now, another interesting nugget about this Israeli Air Force drill, Blue Flag 2021, it marks the first time that a British Air Force squadron has deployed to Israel since the reestablishment of the State of Israel in 1948. And of course, this comes on the heels of last week's flyover by the German Air Force along with Israeli fighter jets. For the first time ever, they flew together over the state of Israel. Folks, imagine that. 76 years after the Holocaust, German fighter jets flying in solidarity with the Jewish people over the Jewish state of Israel. Pretty incredible to see that. But again, a show of solidarity between Israel and its allies in this drill, 7 other nations. But Iran, again, has not been silent on its end. We have a major Iranian Air Force drill taking place this week as well, and reportedly all 12 Iranian air bases are taking part in this massive drill, which will involve Iranian fighter jets and, of course, the Iranian drones, those attack drones that we've talked so much about here on the newscast. Iran building that massive drone arsenal with the intention of passing it off to its proxies in the region. More on that in a second. But this also comes on the heels of a drill held by Iran last week, where Iran unveiled what it called its own version of Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. Now, I don't think it's anywhere near on par with what Israel has produced when it comes to missile defense, in particular Iron Dome. But again, Iran is trying to flex its muscles and show off its military hardware. It is very proud of anything that it produces domestically, in particular that drone program. Thousands of drones rolling off the assembly lines apparently in Iran. And again, key point here, folks, to pass off to others in the region. Speaking of which, we had a drone attack last night, Wednesday, October 20th, in Syria at the Al-Tanf military base. Now, this is near the Syria-Jordan border. This is a small U.S. outpost, really in a remote area in the desert. But of the 900 U.S. troops that are still stationed in Syria, a good chunk are there at the Al-Tanf military base. The other half is near the Syria-Iraq border. But last night, a number of drones and, according to U.S. Central Command, indirect fire hit this base. Now, does indirect fire perhaps mean rockets? We've seen this many times. The hybrid model of drones and rockets used by these Iranian-backed proxies, that is unclear right now. What we do know, thankfully, number one, no one was injured, and number two, no group has claimed responsibility, but we've seen many attacks, and we've documented them here on the Watchman Newscast over the past year, carried out by these Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria against U.S. personnel. Now, U.S. Central Command called this, quote, a deliberate and coordinated attack. So there was thought put into this, and there's kind of big picture thought put into this, I believe, by the Iranian regime and its proxies. They took notes, and they saw the debacle that unfolded in Afghanistan back in August, and they would like to push any U.S. presence out of Iraq and Syria as well. And they think that the U.S. right now, again, in the wake of Afghanistan, is kind of ripe for the pickings in the region. You've got, again, 900 U.S. soldiers in Syria, about 2,500 in Iraq, and Iran and its proxies would like nothing better than to push them out the door. So I am concerned about an increase in attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria in the weeks to come. Iran would like nothing better than to boast of a great victory and chasing the great Satan out of the region for good. That would be a great propaganda coup for the Iranian regime and its proxies. Big question now is, will the U.S. respond to this attack last night? A pretty serious provocation, a drone and possibly rocket attack on a U.S. base. It's a big deal, to say the least. So will the U.S. respond? Hey, in the meantime, tonight on TBN, catch the Watchman TV show. If you love the newscast, you will love our weekly 30-minute TV show on TBN, 10 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, Thursday, October 21st. And we also air on Fridays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And tonight, a very fascinating episode. We are in Bet Shemesh in Israel on the ground for an up-close look at the very place where the Ark of the Covenant once stood after it was returned to Israel by the Philistines, as described in 1 Samuel in the Old Testament. You won't want to miss that tonight. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for joining us here in the Watchman Newscast. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. If you enjoyed this episode and want to see more, make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, click subscribe, and tap the bell icon to turn on notifications for new Watchman Newscast episodes every weekday.